The air in Logan Airport was thick with the hum of anticipation, families dragging suitcases, couples laughing, their voices a chorus of beginnings. I stood frozen, my phone pressed to my ear, my mother's voice dripping like honey through the static. "We're at the cabin, Eliza. Why didn't you make it to the airport yesterday?" My suitcase, packed with hope for a week by Lake Sebago, sat useless beside me. My name is Eliza Harper, and at 32, I thought I'd seen the worst of my family's betrayals. I was wrong. I'd been counting down to this trip for months, a rare chance to stitch together the frayed threads of our family. As a financial analyst in Boston, my days were a blur of spreadsheets and client calls, each one a step toward a dream I'd buried, starting my own investment firm. But family came first, always had. Growing up in a weathered clapboard house in coastal Maine, I learned early that love was a currency I had to earn. My sister, Clara, 6 years younger, was the golden child, her watercolors framed on our walls, her laughter the soundtrack of our home. I was the responsible one, the shadow, pouring my heart into schoolwork to catch a flicker of my parents' pride. When Dad's logging business collapsed a decade ago, their savings already bled dry by Clara's art school tuition, I stepped in. Every month, I wired $2,500 to keep their lights on, their fridge stocked, their medical bills paid. Last year alone, I sent $32,000, money I'd earmarked for a deposit on a brownstone. "You're our rock, Eliza," Mom would say, her voice warm during our Sunday calls. But those calls always circled back to Clara, her latest gallery submission, her big break. My promotions, my 16-hour days? Footnotes, if mentioned at all. This trip was supposed to change that. A week at a lakeside cabin, just the four of us, sharing meals, watching the sun dip below the pines. They insisted on handling the arrangements, citing Dad's frequent flyer miles. "Focus on your big merger meeting," they said. "We've got this." I believed them, sent $4,000 for the cabin deposit, and pictured us laughing over board games. Now, standing in the terminal, my mother's words sank like stones. "Yesterday," I choked out, my voice trembling. "You said the flight was today at 3. The silence on the line was louder than the airport's chaos, and I knew this wasn't a mistake. They'd left me behind. The airport's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, mirroring the static in my mind. I clutched my phone, scrolling through Mom's texts. "Flights at 3 p.m. on the 12th. Don't be late, Eliza." Clear as day. Yet Clara's Instagram story, posted hours ago, showed her sipping coffee by Lake Sebago, Mom and Dad grinning beside her, their boarding passes stamped for the 11th. My knees buckled, and I sank onto a bench, travelers' laughter mocking my solitude. They hadn't just forgotten me, they'd planned this. Growing up, I'd learned to navigate Clara's spotlight. Her paintings adorned our fridge, my report cards gathered dust. I thought I'd made peace with it, carving my own path in Boston's financial district. At 25, I landed a job at a top firm, managing portfolios for clients who trusted my quiet precision. By 30, I was the youngest senior analyst, leading a team of 12. But success came at a cost. Weekends lost to work, dreams of my own firm shelved to keep my parents afloat. Their gratitude was fleeting, always overshadowed by Clara's next masterpiece or Mom's tales of her talent. When they pitched the Maine trip, I saw a lifeline. A week to rebuild what years of distance had eroded. I sent the $4,000 without hesitation, imagining evenings by the lake, maybe even a moment where they'd see me. But now, the truth was undeniable. "It was a mix-up, sweetie," Mom said when I called back, her voice syrupy with false regret. "Clara made it fine. We're at the cabin now." I laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. "A mix-up? You gave me the wrong date on purpose." Silence stretched, then Dad's voice cut in, stern. "Don't make this a drama, Eliza. Mistakes happen." Mistakes. The word burned. For years, I'd been their safety net, $500 a month, plus extra for Dad's knee surgery, Mom's prescriptions. I'd skipped vacations, worked through holidays, all to keep them comfortable while Clara chased her art, rent-free in their house. And this was my reward, a deliberate lie, my money spent on a trip I wasn't meant to join. I stared at Clara's photo, their smiles a blade in my chest. You didn't want me there, I said, my voice steady now. You took my money and left me behind. Dad started to argue, but I hung up, my hands shaking with a fury I'd never let myself feel before. In that crowded terminal, I made a vow. The bank of Eliza Harper was closed. Forever. The drive back to my Boston apartment was a haze, the city lights blurring through tears I refused to let fall. In my mind, I replayed every sacrifice, $47,000 over 2 years, wired to my parents' account for their mortgage, their groceries, their lies. I'd given up my dream of a brownstone, of mornings sipping coffee on my own porch, all to prop up their crumbling world. And for what? To be stranded in an airport, betrayed by the people I'd spent my life trying to please. Back home, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop, scrolling through bank statements. Each transfer to their account, $2, $500, $3,000, $1,800 for emergencies, was a reminder of their greed. I thought of Clara, her carefree smile in that lakeside photo, captioned, "Family time." Wish you were here, Eliza. The lie stung worse than Mom's excuses. I dug deeper, finding texts from Dad, need a little extra this month for Clara's art supplies. Art supplies. I'd believed it, picturing her in a Portland studio, chasing her dreams. Now I wondered what else they'd hidden. I called Dad again, my voice cold. Explain the $4,000 I sent for the trip. Was that for Clara's art too? He sighed, like I was the unreasonable one. Eliza, we're on a fixed income. Clara needed this break. Her gallery rejections have been tough. You're doing so well, you can afford it. My blood boiled. Afford it? I gave up my savings for you. And you used me to fund a trip you didn't even want me on. His tone hardened. You're being selfish. Family makes sacrifices. I laughed, bitter. Sacrifices? I've given you everything. Clara's living rent-free, painting nothing while I work myself to death. No more, Dad. I hung up before he could guilt me further. That night, I logged into my bank's app and froze the joint account I'd set up for their transfers. At work the next morning, I called HR, removing Mom and Dad as beneficiaries from my life insurance. Each click felt like shedding a weight I'd carried too long. My phone buzzed, Mom's voicemail, tearful. How could you do this to us, Eliza? We're family. Then Clara, you're breaking Mom's heart over a misunderstanding. I deleted them all. They thought they could manipulate me forever, but I was done being their pawn. For the first time, I saw their love for what it was, a transaction. And I was ready to rewrite the terms. The messages came like a storm. Mom's voicemails piled up, each one a performance of tears. Eliza, we can't lose you. This is tearing us apart. Clara's texts were sharper, accusing, you're overreacting. It was just a mix-up, and now Mom's a wreck because of you. Dad's were the worst, his words laced with venom. We raised you better than this. Your mother's meds run out this week. Don't you dare shirk your duty. I stared at my phone, their audacity a punch to the gut. Duty? They'd taken my money, my trust, and left me stranded, and still they demanded more. I sat in my apartment, the Boston skyline glittering beyond my window, and drafted an email. My fingers trembled, but my resolve was iron. Dear Mom, Dad, and Clara, I wrote, the cabin trip wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. You used my money and lied to exclude me. I've given you $47,000 over 2 years, money I sacrificed my own dreams for. That ends now. I'm stopping all financial support. Find another way to cover your expenses. Don't contact me about money again. I need space to rethink what family means. I hit send, my heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. Their responses were immediate. Mom's voicemails grew frantic. We'll lose the house, Eliza. How could you be so cruel? Clara's texts called me selfish, claiming I'd abandoned them. Dad's messages turned threatening. You'll regret this. We'll see who needs who. I blocked their numbers, each tap a small rebellion against years of guilt. I'd been conditioned to put them first, to believe my worth lay in what I gave them. But standing in that airport, staring at Clara's smug lakeside photo, had shattered that illusion. The next day, as I analyzed market trends at my desk, a familiar voice broke my focus. Aunt Lillian, Dad's older sister stood in my office doorway, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes sharp with concern. "I heard what happened," she said, sitting across from me. I braced for a lecture, but her words surprised me. "What they did was wrong, Eliza. I've watched them lean on you for years, taking your kindness for granted. You're not the villain here." Her hand squeezed mine, and tears pricked my eyes. "Someone saw me, not the dutiful daughter, not the bank account, but me. They'll try to pull you back," Lillian warned. "Stay strong." For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. 2 weeks after my email, Lillian called me during a lunch break, her voice tight. "Eliza, can you come to my place after work? I found something you need to see." I spent the afternoon distracted, my mind racing as I crunched numbers in my Boston office. Lillian had always been the practical one in our family, a retired accountant who saw through Dad's excuses long before I did. Her urgency unnerved me. When I arrived at her modest Maine cottage, the scent of cedar and sea air greeted me. Lillian had papers strewn across her dining table, bank statements, loan applications, credit card bills. "Your father asked me for a loan last week," she said, her eyes narrowing. His story didn't add up, so I dug deeper. She slid a credit card statement toward me. My name was on it, but I'd never applied for it. A $20,000 balance glared back at me, racked up over 3 months. My hands shook as I checked my credit report on my phone. There it was, a card I didn't know existed, opened with my social security number. "They've been using your money for more than bills," Lillian said, pointing to another document. "Gambling debts, thousands spent at casinos in Connecticut. And Clara's art career? She's been working at a bakery in town, not some Portland studio." My stomach churned. All those transfers for headshots and gallery fees were lies, funneled into my parents' reckless spending. "This is identity theft, Eliza," Lillian said softly. "It's a crime." My phone buzzed, "Mom," from a new number. "Your father's having heart palpitations from this stress. If he collapses, it's on you." I showed Lillian, who shook her head. "More games. They're desperate because you've cut them off." I thought of the years I'd spent prioritizing their needs, skipping trips, delaying my firm's launch, believing their sob stories. They hadn't just taken my money, they'd stolen my future. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lillian's gaze was steady. "You can press charges or handle it privately, but you need to protect yourself. Freeze your credit, gather evidence, and confront them with someone there to back you up." That night, I lay awake, my anger crystallizing into resolve. They'd played me for years, but this was the end game. I called a lawyer the next morning, preparing for a confrontation. The Maine cabin trip was supposed to bring us closer, but it had exposed their betrayal. Now, I'd face them on my terms, with the truth as my weapon. Saturday morning, I drove to Lillian's cottage, a folder of evidence tucked under my arm, credit card statements, bank transfers, screenshots of their texts. My lawyer had outlined my options: press charges for identity theft or negotiate a repayment plan. Either way, I needed them to know the game was over. The Maine air was crisp, the pines whispering as I steeled myself. I'd spent years chasing their approval, but today I was claiming my power. My parents and Clara arrived at Lillian's, their faces a mix of guilt and defiance. Mom's eyes were red, but I recognized the calculated tears. Dad's jaw was set, like he was ready for a fight. Clara looked pale, avoiding my gaze. They sat in Lillian's living room, the silence heavy as I began. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. "We need to talk about this." I held up the credit card statement. A $20,000 card in my name. "Care to explain?" Mom jumped in, her voice quivering. "It was an emergency, Eliza. We meant to tell you." I laid out more papers, casino receipts, loan applications. "An emergency like gambling? Or telling me Clara's in Portland when she's working at a bakery here?" Clara's head snapped up, confusion in her eyes. "What?" she whispered. I turned to her. "They said my money was for your art, headshots, rent. But you've been here, Clara. They lied to us both." The room erupted. Clara's voice cracked as she faced Mom and Dad. "You told me Eliza refused to help with my tuition." Mom tried to interrupt, but I cut her off. "Enough. You committed identity theft. That's a federal crime. I slid the repayment agreement across the table. Sign this, repay every cent, and close that card. Or I press charges. Dad's face reddened. You wouldn't dare. We're your parents. Lillian's voice cut through. Parents don't steal from their kids. Sign it, Tom. For a moment, I thought Dad might refuse. Then he clutched his chest, gasping my heart. I froze, but Lillian's sharp glance stopped me. No more tricks, she said. Dad's hand dropped, his act exposed. They signed, Mom's tears drying fast, Clara staring at them like strangers. As they left, I felt no triumph, only a hollow ache for the family I'd wanted. But standing there, with Lillian's hand on my shoulder, I knew I'd taken back my life. The cabin they'd excluded me from had set me free. In the weeks that followed, my parents' carefully built world unraveled. The repayment agreement forced them to sell their sprawling Maine house, the one I'd helped pay for with years of transfers. They moved into a cramped apartment in Portland, their retirement income now funneled into paying back the $20,000 they'd stolen. It wasn't about revenge, it was accountability. Each check that arrived, small but steady, was a reminder that I'd finally set a boundary they couldn't cross. Clara reached out one evening, her voice hesitant over the phone. I didn't know, Eliza, she said. They told me you didn't care about my art, that you were too busy for us. I wanted to be angry, but her words carried a familiar hurt, the sting of being their pawn. She'd moved in with Lillian, enrolling in community college to study graphic design. Can we talk sometime? She asked. Maybe coffee? I paused, the weight of years between us. Maybe, I said. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a door cracked open. My parents didn't give up easily. They showed up at my Boston office one morning, unannounced, Mom's wails echoing in the lobby. We're losing everything, Eliza. After all we did for you. Colleagues stared, but I stood tall, my voice calm. You lost me. That's what matters. Security escorted them out, and as their figures faded, I felt a quiet peace. The guilt that once chained me, those nights worrying about their bills, their health, their approval, was gone. I was no longer their savior or their scapegoat. That evening, I booked a solo trip to the Lake Sebago cabin. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd tried to keep me from that lake, but now it was mine to claim. As I confirmed the reservation, my phone buzzed with a text from Lillian. They're out of the house. Clara's asking about you. I smiled, picturing the lake's still water, the pines framing the sky. I was ready to rewrite what family meant, starting with myself. At work, I threw myself into a new project, my focus sharper without the constant drain of their demands. My team noticed, one colleague joking, Eliza, you're glowing. What's the secret? I laughed, deflecting, but I knew the truth. I was building a life for me. The dream of my own firm, once buried under their needs, felt within reach. As I walked home, the Boston skyline sparkling, I realized their betrayal had given me something they never intended, freedom to choose myself. The Maine air was sharp with pine and possibility as I stood on the dock of Lake Sebago, the cabin's warm lights glowing behind me. The water lapped gently, reflecting a sunset that bled orange and pink across the sky. This wasn't the family trip I dreamed of, no laughter with Mom, no late-night talks with Clara, but it was better. It was mine. I'd arrived that morning, my suitcase lighter without the weight of their expectations. For the first time in years, I breathed freely, the knot in my chest unraveling with each wave. Back in Boston, my life was shifting. A promotion landed on my desk the week before, a nod to the energy I now poured into my work. Without the constant buzz of Mom's tearful voicemails or Dad's demands, I had space to dream again. I'd started researching office spaces for my investment firm, sketching plans on napkins during lunch breaks. The $47,000 I'd given my parents could have been my startup capital, but I refused to dwell. Their betrayal had cost me money, but it had bought me clarity. My phone buzzed as I sipped coffee on the dock. A text from Lillian. Clara's doing okay at college. She mentioned meeting you for coffee when you're back. I stared at the message, memories of Clara's childhood flashing, her paint-splattered hands, her shy smile when I praised her drawings. She'd been as much a victim of our parents' lies as I was, pitted against me in their twisted game. I typed back, tell her I'm open to it. It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. Healing with Clara would take time, and I was okay with that. The repayment checks kept coming, each one a small victory. My parents' emails still trickled in, Mom's latest claiming, "We're scraping by while you live it up. Is this who you are?" I deleted it, her words no longer hooks in my skin. They'd sold their boat, their second car, their pride, all to keep the fraud charges at bay. I didn't revel in their struggle. I just wanted what was mine. Standing by the lake, I felt the weight of years lift, years spent chasing their love, believing I owed them my dreams. They'd planned that cabin trip to exclude me, but they'd handed me the key to my own life. As the stars emerged, I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, the chill grounding me. This lake, this moment, was my reclaiming. I wasn't here to forgive or forget. I was here to begin. Back in Boston, the rhythm of my life felt new, like a song I was finally learning the words to. My days were no longer punctuated by Mom's frantic calls or Dad's veiled threats. The silence was a gift, letting me hear my own thoughts for the first time in years. At work, I led meetings with a confidence I hadn't known I'd lost, my team's respect a quiet affirmation. I'd even found a small office space to lease for my future firm, its brick walls and tall windows a canvas for my dreams. Each step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Clara texted me one evening, her words tentative, "Can we meet at the cafe on Newberry Street this weekend? I owe you an apology." I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to keep her at arm's length, to protect the peace I'd fought for. But another part remembered the little girl who'd slip her drawings under my door, hoping for my smile. I replied, Saturday, 10 a.m. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a chance. Lillian kept me updated on my parents. Their new apartment was a far cry from the sprawling house I'd helped maintain, but they were managing. The repayment plan held firm, $500 a month, drawn from Dad's pension and Mom's part-time tutoring. They'd stopped sending manipulative emails, perhaps sensing I was untouchable now. The lawyer had made it clear, one missed payment, and the fraud charges would surface. I didn't want their ruin, just their accountability. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about the family we could have been. I'd picture us at the cabin, sharing stories by the fire, Mom's laughter genuine, Dad's pride untainted by greed. But those were ghosts, not memories. The truth was uglier, and accepting it had freed me. I'd spent years believing love meant sacrifice, that my worth was tied to what I gave them. Now, I knew better, love didn't demand my soul. As I walked through Boston Common, the leaves crunching underfoot, I felt the lightness I hadn't known since childhood. The Maine trip had been their attempt to break me, but it had built me instead. I was no longer the dutiful daughter, the invisible sister, the family's ATM. I was Eliza Harper, carving a life on my terms, one dream at a time. The lake's quiet beauty lingered in my mind, a promise that I could choose myself and still find peace. The cafe on Newberry Street smelled of espresso and fresh pastries, its warmth a contrast to the crisp autumn air. Clara sat across from me, her hands fidgeting around a latte. "I'm sorry, Eliza," she said, her voice small but steady. "I didn't know they were lying to us both. I thought you didn't care about me." Her eyes, so like mine, held a pain I recognized. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. "I believe their stories too," I admitted. "But we can't change the past." We talked for an hour, tentative but honest, planting seeds for something new. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was enough for now. Back at work, I signed the lease for my office space, my heart racing as I imagined my firm's name on the door. The $20,000 my parents owed was coming in steadily, each payment a step toward closing that chapter. Lillian called one evening, her voice lighter. "Clara's thriving in her design classes," she said. "And your parents, they're quiet. No more stunts." I smiled, picturing their cramped apartment, their old tricks useless. They'd tried to control me, but I'd rewritten the story. One weekend, I drove back to Lake Sebago, the cabin's familiar silhouette welcoming me. Standing on the dock, I watched the water ripple under a crescent moon. This place, meant to be their weapon, had become my sanctuary. I thought of the years I'd spent chasing their love, sacrificing my dreams to fill their voids. They'd taken my money, my trust, but they couldn't take my future. I was building it now, client by client, plan by plan, choice by choice. As I packed to leave, my phone buzzed with an email from Mom, slipped through a new account. "We're trying, Eliza. Can't we start over?" I deleted it, not out of anger, but clarity. Some bridges don't need rebuilding, they need to stay burned. I drove back to Boston, the road ahead open, my heart full of a quiet strength. They'd planned to leave me behind, but they'd given me the greatest gift, myself. To everyone who's walked this path with me, thank you. You've stood by me through betrayal, heartbreak, and hard-won freedom. If Eliza's story stirred something in you, hit that subscribe button and join us. Every choice we make, every boundary we set, is a story of reclaiming who we are. Keep carving your own path, and I'll meet you at the lake, where the water's still and the future's yours.